Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. It may be in the headlines because Ray Rice and the NFL are at the heart of a very public outcry against domestic violence. But ask women who live in fear of their spouse or significant other every day, and they will tell you this is not new, and it is not a joke. Intimate partner violence crosses all ethnic, racial, and socioeconomic lines. But did you know domestic violence is the leading cause of death for African American women between the ages of 15 and 35? Frank conversation about domestic violence, plus resources for those who need help. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Hear the name Ray Rice, and instantly the image of his now wife, Janay, being dragged out of an elevator after Rice knocks her out with his fist is an image that won't easily fade. It is sad to say that this very public display of domestic violence happens behind closed doors to ordinary women in the U.S. every 9 seconds. Though domestic violence knows no race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status, women of color, including African American women, have the added burden of culture, lack of trust of law enforcement, rejection of family, and religious beliefs that may prevent them from ever reporting the violence. Our guest today will explore the many facets of domestic violence and offer hope and support to those in our listening audience who may need help right now. Please welcome to Another View, Ruth Jones, Executive Director of the YWCA Southampton Rose and a domestic violence survivor. Hi, Ruth. How are you?
Hi, Barbara. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Larissa Sutherland, Education and Outreach Coordinator for Samaritan House. Hi, Larissa. How are you?
Hi, Barbara. I'm fine. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much for being here. And Natalie Purdie, a survivor of domestic abuse who shares her stories with others so that they do not suffer alone. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good. I'm okay. So let's start. Before we get into your story, because I really think that what happened to you is just so typical, but also just so dramatic in terms of what domestic violence is. Ruth, let me get from you and Larissa a definition of domestic violence. What's the difference between domestic violence, child abuse? I mean, all of it happens in the home. So what's the clinical definition? Larissa.
Domestic violence really is defined as a pattern of behavior that one partner will use in a relationship to control the other. And that pattern of behavior might include physical assault, sexual assault, verbal abuse, economic control, isolation, threats and intimidations. Lots of different behaviors that will all come together to manifest as just taking over someone else's life.
So that's what separates it from, say, child abuse as an example.
Right. Child abuse is often pulled in there under that same umbrella, but also often as a result of a domineering partner.
So, Ruth, it's all about control.
It's all about power and control, and a lot of people actually don't understand the extent to which their behaviors are related to their need to feel power and control in relationships. We had a community forum last night where an individual said, I didn't realize I was engaging in abusive behaviors until I sat in a room with other men and talked about the signs of domestic violence and the definition. So it really is about power and control that individuals try to exert in their relationships.
So, Natalie, let's talk about what happened to you, because you have kind of a two-part to your story, don't you?
Yes. Yes, I do. In my relationship with the control, his way of controlling, he made it appear as if it was just wanting to be around me, wanting to show love. And it wasn't until towards the end that I started feeling him tugging more on the control part and talking more and more every day about getting married and being so serious about it in such a short time.
So you hadn't been dating him long?
No. We dated for a year, and like for about 4 months it was more serious. We were dating, seeing each other all the time, almost every day. And So when he talked about marriage and talked about long term, I didn't know that he meant right now.
So you tried to slow the relationship down?
Yes.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if I wanted to slow it down or if we should just take a break.
Okay.
So I tried to explain to him, either or, but something has to change because it's getting to be too much. And I wanted to clarify, I can't marry you. No time soon. I can't marry you.
So what happened?
We had a conversation, and it lasted for a couple of hours. It was like an off and on type of thing, just pointing out the reasons of why I felt like it was too soon. And he appeared that he may be understanding in a way of what I was saying, but at the same time, we kept coming back around full circle to why, Natalie, I love you.
Well, how old were you at this point?
I had just turned 18.
Okay, so you were very young.
I was very
Awesome.
young.
Okay.
It was only I had only been 18 for a month.
Wow. And how much older was he than you?
And he was 24.
Okay. Okay. So you're telling him that you don't want to get married, you want to slow things down, and that fateful evening, what happened?
On that fateful evening, he acted like he was about to leave because I said, well, it's getting late, and so maybe we should talk tomorrow, or maybe we should just take a break and maybe not talk tomorrow, maybe give it a couple of days. And he said, okay. And he stood up to leave. And when I turned to make sure that he was behind me to walk him to the door, by the time I turned around to look, his hands were in the air coming down as if like you were about to punch someone, but he had a pair of scissors in his hand. I had been cutting out my senior pictures right before he came. So he had taken the scissors and had them. And so by the time I looked, he was in mid-force of coming down to strike me, and he continuously stabbed me.
How many times?
Over 30 times.
Oh, my goodness. What happened to you?
My grandmother was home. And so she was the one who called the ambulance and took me to the hospital. As a result, I had a fractured skull with a blood tumor in my brain. I'm temporarily paralyzed. It temporarily paralyzed my eye muscles. And it's been a long time in rehabilitation with migraine headaches and just trying to get myself back together again. But even while I was in the hospital, he continued to call.
To say,
I still want to marry you.
Wow. What did you do? Did you press charges?
Yes.
And how was the legal system?
The legal system at that time, this was in 1986. And so the laws were totally different. And they definitely didn't recognize domestic violence like they do now, and still a struggle. But at that time, they looked at it as she knew him. They knew each other. So that's why it was totally different as opposed to if it was a stranger attacking me. And there were a lot of things that were not handled properly.
So to move the story along, because I want to get to how you wound up yet in court again.
Yes.
He received probation. Is that right?
Yes.
So he didn't serve any time?
No time.
Or anything for stabbing you over 30 times?
That's correct.
All right, let's
with a witness.
With a witness, because your grandmother was there. So let's fast forward to 2010, I believe, and you wound up having to testify against him again. What happened there?
So in 2010, he attacked someone else. And so in 2011 is when they located me. And then the first thing I said to the prosecutor is I asked about his legal defense. And then I explained to her, please be aware that he's going to try and drag this out because that's what they do so that the scars are not as visible. And just so the time takes care of a lot of things where you're not, once it's going through the court for so long, by the time you do get to court later, the judge is ready to get it over with. The victim has been just dragged through this long term, and everybody is kind of like just let's hear it and go. And that's kind of what they did in my case. You know, they kept continuing it to finally say, well, look, here's the deal. And they kind of pressure the victims to say, take this deal or he'll just walk. So when they, in my case, when they told us to take the deal, they told us that we didn't have to come to court. The deal would just be settled. But when they went to court and we weren't there.
It's okay.
He got lesser charge. They lessened the charge to unlawful assault. So we went from attempted murder, you know, to aggravated assault to unlawful assault.
So you felt like you had been violated all over again.
All over again. So, you know, one thing I can say to victims, it is so, and not just victims, but friends and family. It's so important. It's so critical to, if any other time you didn't have their back, when they go to court, they need that support. They need the visibility in the courtroom. It's so important, and it's something that people look at. And so, so moving forward, 2011, they notified me, and I was like, absolutely. I may change my mind tomorrow, but today, yes, I'll do it. Because if I can save one other person from going through what I went through, I'll do it. So they dragged it out. Went to court in 2012. Almost exactly to the day of my attack.
Wow.
And so when we went to court, the courtroom was filled to capacity. All his family, friends, and they just didn't know that I had a few family and friends there. But it was so many of their friends and family that they almost thought that my family was with them. And the victim was unable to come, but no one else came on her behalf. So I testified, and when I testified, excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
He received double the penalty. And they informed me that had I not testified, he would have definitely gotten less time.
Again.
Again.
And the young lady this time, if I remember the news reports correctly, he actually bit her face, tried to gouge out her eye. I mean, the violence was just incredible.
He admitted in court that he bit down to the bone of her cheek. It was the size of a $50.
Larissa, you counsel people and work with people on a daily basis that have experienced this. What makes the perpetrator so angry or so? I'm trying to understand the mindset of someone who could, that's going on here, that they feel that they have to go to this extreme in order to stay in a relationship or control the person.
I think that's a behavior that's extraordinarily complex, and that it tends to build over time. Abusive relationships never start as abusive relationships. The relationships start as wonderful relationships, and the person that you're with is everything you want in a person, in a partner. And then those controlling behaviors begin, and a lot of them are missed early on. The red flags are overlooked, and that control settles in, and it becomes more, the assaults become more frequent and more severe, and they build over time. And much of it is a sense of not really having any consequences to that action, of being able to get away with it. And violence works. Violence controls people. It's tried and true. And so once it's working, there's no reason to stop it unless something else comes along to intervene. And in Natalie's case, it's a phenomenal story that a case that severe was pled down to a 5-year probation charge, which I think he also violated, right? And still never saw jail time.
That's correct.
And I have to applaud you, Natalie, for the story, for telling the story, but mostly for going to court the second time, showing up to do that very difficult thing, because I know the defense was that he had suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and the violence was a result of his time in combat, right?
Yes.
So for you to come speak on an incident that happened prior to that is amazing.
And not only that, but Natalie,
Yes.
you see how fresh it is, because even this was almost 26 years ago.
Yeah.
And when you talk about it still, it's right there. Do you think you'll ever, you don't get past it. So what do you do with it? What is your advocacy then? Is this part of the reason why you talk about it, to help you to heal?
Absolutely. It's definitely, it helps with the healing to talk about it. You know, when you're first going through domestic violence of any type of sort, a lot of times you're so used to hiding it. On a typical daily basis, this is what you do. You hide it. You hide it from your friends. You hide it from your family. You hide it from your coworkers. You hide it from everyone. So you don't talk about it. A lot of people will not talk about it. And even after they're out of the situation and they're a survivor, a lot of times it's hard to talk about because people are so quick to judge. And they judge you, and basically you must be weak. You must be stupid. You know, what would make you not? Why would you tolerate that? You must have low self-esteem. You know, so
it's like blaming you all over
always,
again.
yes.
Ruth, let me ask you about that, because the victim a lot of times takes on the blame as opposed to the person who's actually doing the harm.
Right. I think sometimes, those who have been abused feel like they did something to warrant that abuse, whether they didn't follow the instructions or the mandates of their abuser regarding their schedule or how they use finances or even the friends with whom they interact. They wonder if they did something to warrant the abuse and if they can do something differently in the future to prevent the abuse. And, going back to what we said earlier, this isn't about the abused behavior. It's about power and control. And if someone isn't feeling powerful or that sense of control outside of the relationship or outside of the home, you're going to see that play out sometimes in the intimate partner relationships. And so, as Larissa said, it's very complex when you think about why individuals abuse, particularly when it comes to men who have been marginalized in our society and don't feel that sense of power in their place of employment, in their churches, in their social circles. And so where do they have an opportunity to experience the power and control? Too oftentimes it's in those intimate partner relationships.
And it's not handled properly. That power is not handled properly. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Join our conversation if you have been abused or if you are looking for help, if you want to get out and you need some advice. Give us a call. We're here to help you. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Staying in line with this whole idea of the victim kind of taking on the responsibility, I want to play a clip, Victor, of Janay Rice and her response during the press conference. Let's take a listen.
I do deeply regret the role that I played in the incident that night, but I can say that I am happy that we continue to work through it together, and we are continuing to strengthen our relationship and our marriage and do what we have to do for not only ourselves collectively, but individually, and working on being better parents for Raven and continue to be good role models for the community like we were doing before this. I love Ray, and I know he will continue to prove himself to not only you all, but the community, and I know he will gain your respect back in due time.
You know, there's a woman, Leslie Morgan Steiner, who wrote the book Crazy Love. And as a matter of fact, she was a guest speaker at the YWCA a couple years ago. But she said about Janay saying, you know, I love Ray and we're going to work this out. And she says, she loves him just like I loved my ex-husband, even at the bitter end. I see somebody who is in denial about how much danger she's in, which is the most common thing that victims feel. What your reaction, Larissa?
The reaction to Janay?
To Janay, yeah. I mean, does she get it, do you think? Or I mean, is she, I guess the line is, where do you draw between, you know, stand by your man and we can fix this, and you're a victim of abuse and you need to rethink this?
I think that's a fuzzy line because, and I hope everyone recognizes that I think she is very sincere in wanting her marriage to work and wanting her family to be repaired and sincerely wanting everyone to leave them alone. However, I don't think we can do that, and I don't think that I think we have a responsibility to help explore those issues, whether it's Janay Palmer Rice or another victim in another situation who's not in the spotlight, but maybe in our community and our families, that we all have a responsibility to talk through those issues so that we're breaking through that denial, so that we're really looking at what a healthy relationship is, what do people deserve in a relationship, what does it look like, and how do you accept that you're not in it anymore? And going back to the very beginning of their relationship, I'm sure it was, and I'm sure it still contains lots of moments of joy and happiness, but it's frightening from this perspective to see that those instances of violence are appearing, and probably most people in the field of domestic violence expect that that's not the only one that's happened and probably won't be the only one, but we don't know. So from an outside perspective, we can offer the suggestion, let's work on this, let's talk it out.
Ruth, and particularly in the African American community, there is that whole thing of, first of all, you know, what goes on behind closed doors is what goes on behind closed doors, but also that, well, he loves me, that's why he wants to know where I am, or he loves me, that's why, you know, a little swat here and there. It's almost like a badge of honor in some parts of our community. How do we break that? How do we get people to understand that this is not the right way to be treated?
I think Larissa touched on it already. We have to spread the word about what healthy relationships look like and what individuals deserve in those relationships from their partners or significant others. In the African American community, overwhelmingly, we have, I think, misplaced our values in terms of what relationships should look like, in part because we haven't seen that modeled for us. You know, so many individuals are growing up in single parent homes where they don't have the opportunity to see two individuals interacting in a very loving way. And so when they grow up, they in part do what they've seen modeled for them. So I think we have to raise awareness, certainly, but also for the things that we know are right, things that we know are wrong. We need to be very honest about those things in the African American community. When we see someone who is being abused, whether it's physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, whatever the abuse is, we need to speak out about that and say that it's not okay, while also offering support for the victims.
But Natalie, even if we go to our churches, if we go sometimes and the pastor said, now you just need to be a good little girl and you know, work it out with your husband. I mean, how do we get even our male pastors in particular to understand that this is more than allowing the man to be the head of the household?
Exactly. It's more than just saying I have to let the man be in control. Janay said it in that clip. What a lot of people say every day about the situation, especially with that scene in the elevator. She addressed it as soon as she opened it up on that clip. When she said, I'd like to apologize for the role that I played. Because a lot of men look at that and say, the first thing that they say is, did you see the part where she jumped up in his face?
I've heard that a lot, yeah. As if that's an excuse for what happened.
Yes.
Is that?
I actually had someone from law enforcement even said to me, it was her fault.
You know, I struggle with this, and I'm real curious from each of you, because in that very incident that you're talking about, how do we teach, though, our young people? At some point, people snap. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying, though, at some point people snap. So it seems to me that there needs to be some kind of training so that both sides understand that violence is wrong, period.
I totally agree. I do. I think that when you're getting into situations where you're looking at relationships that may be developing violence that's co-combative, and what you're really looking at is really breaking it down and saying, okay, who is the one who's really trying to take over the relationship? Who's trying to take control, and who is the one that's fighting that back? And sometimes that's obvious, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes there's a long power battle going on. But we have to get past this idea that retaliatory violence is justified, that if someone commits an act of violence against us, regardless of the degree, that we have every right to strike back.
And so we don't know what was happening prior to her getting in his face, and then the ultimate punch out. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the many facets of domestic violence with Ruth Jones, Executive Director of the YWCA Southampton Roads, Larissa Sutherland, Education and Outreach Coordinator with Samaritan House, and Natalie Purdie, a domestic abuse survivor. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We'd love to hear from men. What do you say when you see another man acting in a domestic in a violent way against a woman? Do you step up? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Ruth, I know that the YWCA has started a campaign, both you and Samaritan House, different perspectives, but all to the same point of trying to stop domestic violence. But you all are looking at it from the male perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We are, the YWCA Southampton Roads has been around for more than 100 years in this community, working to eliminate racism and empower women. We like to think of ourselves as a movement as opposed to an organization, a movement that was started by women and for women. We've done a phenomenal job of engaging women in our movement, but if in fact we are going to end domestic violence in our community, we need men to stand up and say, this is not okay. So we recently launched a new campaign. It's called One Man Can Make a Difference. It's an opportunity for men to really stand up and take an active part in ending domestic violence, whether they do that as advocates, champions, volunteers, or role models. So we have that campaign that we rolled out. It includes 4 television public service announcements, and then at the end of this month we're going to be recognizing men in our community who empower others, particularly women, by being role models, excellent husbands or partners, and we just want to really showcase these men so that folks know it's not just women who are saying this is not okay, but men are saying it as well.
Larissa, you guys also have a set of PSAs that you have going on this month in particular, but your focus is on various scenarios that people need to think about in terms of domestic violence.
Right. It's really great. I think we're actually having the same conversation because our public service announcements are really geared around recognizing that each person who is a victim has a story, that each story has a face, and that all of our programs, Samaritan House, is available to help anyone in need. But we're also talking with men. We have a couple of events coming up in November with the same principle, really, to bring more men into the conversation. We have a 100 Men event that's coming up in November, which is the second year we're doing this event. And we're also hosting a speaker, Byron Hurt, at ODU on November 18th. He'll be speaking to the community. He's an anti-violence educator and is really about empowering men to take up this issue and speak on their own behalves and speak on the behalves of people who are affected most directly by it.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Justin joins us from Yorktown. Hi, Justin. You're in Justin.
Hi. How's it going? I'm actually calling. I noticed that you were talking earlier about what needs to be done, and whether it's domestic violence child abuse, sexual assault. It all comes down to training, and within the education system, it's almost as if the men or boys are being told that it's okay to have the views or act the way that you are, and women are the ones that are being reprimanded with make sure you cover yourself up, make sure that you treat men in a specific way, like you said, with be a better wife or be a better girlfriend. It all comes down to the way that little boys are being trained, both in the home and at school. And I believe that just misogyny, being chauvinistic, it all has to go away. Our culture, our society has trained men to treat women the way that they are.
Okay, Justin, thanks so much for the call. Natalie, I see you shaking your head there. You agree with Justin. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I was thinking that earlier when we were all talking. We definitely need to start addressing it. I feel like we need to start addressing it in schools. Mm-hmm. This needs to be something that's trained in schools. Just like we started in schools about sex education, awareness about diseases, sexually transmitted diseases and everything. I feel like starting in elementary, children need to be taught. But definitely once we start moving towards middle school, this is something that we really need to address. And I've always said in my goal of going out and speaking to people, the main people that I want to speak to is to young people, to boys and girls, because your hormones are going through so much and you're trying to find yourself. And that's kind of where I was at 18 years old, trying to find myself. And that's why I think it's so important to speak to people as they're younger and they're getting into any type of relationship, even a friendship. You have kids that, what happened? Why are you two fighting? Well, he hit me first. Well, then you hit him back.
Yeah, the way we teach, the way we socialize. That's
Yes.
There was a woman at the panel last evening who even said we even need to start younger than the school age. That even within the home, when they're 1 and 2 years old, that we teach our kids how to get along. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Shelley joins us. Not sure where you're calling from, Shelley. Where are you?
I'm in West Point, Virginia.
Hi, Shelley. How are you? Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm calling to, one, say that this can happen to anybody, and two, that it would be really helpful if we could all be honest about it. And the reason I say that is I got married for the first time in my life when I was 34, and I was an established professional woman making a good income, and I dated this man for 3 years. And he was a lovely man, and there was no sign of anything like this, any kind of abuse or verbal or anything. He was very, very sweet and very respectful and very wonderful. So we got married. He had been married before. He had a first wife. Within 1 month after we got married, the physical abuse started, and I kind of summarize it with one sentence, that I had never had a broken bone in my body until we got married. And, and I had many broken bones after that, and when I left him, I never had a broken bone again.
I was going to say, Shelley, thank you for sharing that. I have a question for you as you reflect.
Let me finish saying this.
Okay.
I left him. I recognized I was going to get hurt badly. I knew that, and I could see it progressively every time it got worse. I left him, and I asked his ex-wife, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she said, "Well, I didn't think it was any of my business."
Wow. So we need to share with each other also when we encounter men who are doing this behavior. As you look back and reflect on your relationship prior to getting married, is there anything that stands out in terms of control that you may recognize now that you didn't then?
Possibly so. We would have parties together, and he always wanted to set the buffet table himself because he had to do it his way, which, fine. I didn't care how the buffet table was set up. I don't care. Do it any way you want. But I thought it was just an idiosyncrasy. I didn't, realize that given the opportunity, he could go much, much further with that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us, Shelley. We really appreciate it. Larissa, is there, as in context, are there certain things that you need to look for when you're in a relationship that will start to indicate, 'cause like Shelley said, he wanted to set the table, big deal.
Right.
But, how do you start to recognize that it's more than just he wants to set the table?
I think a lot of times the first sign that things are going from a healthy, balanced relationship to one that's out of balance and one where power and control is entering comes to around jealousy. When someone starts sort of defining the role that the other person can play, what kind of clothing that person can wear, what kind of makeup, what kind of hairstyle, whom they can talk to, whom they can socialize with, who's a Facebook friend, let me see your phone, all of these things, that the behaviors that sort of set in that start taking away someone else's basic rights to privacy and to autonomy and to even personality. So those are some of the controlling behaviors. And then someone who's very rigid in that structure, very rigid in gender roles and expectations, often sets up that same dynamic where society is sort of reinforcing that this is the power position that you can own. So having all of those things coming together. What else, Ruth, do you think of?
You want to add to that, Ruth?
Controlling finances, really limiting the amount of money you can spend on certain things, controlling your schedule and behavior, excessive name calling, mention isolation from friends and family. Those are all things that will let you know you are in a relationship that is trending in the wrong direction.
And anytime, I think, breaking down somebody's self-esteem is really starting, and that can be so subtle. Sometimes, it might be obvious when there's a name calling situation. You might realize, like, wow, that wasn't nice. But then, sometimes that can be really subtle, like, what's wrong with you? Something to undermine someone's sense of themselves. Yeah.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. The phones are lit up, so let's take some calls. David joins us from Deltaville. Hi, David. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
All righty.
I just wanted to make a comment about abuse. I've actually been through it. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was with a girl who had been abused in the past, and then we got together, and I treated her like gold, So she was so scared of losing me that she became controlling and wanted to take over every aspect of my life. So eventually we broke up, and we had a child together as well. But we break up, and she goes through multiple boyfriends who are all abusive to her. And despite the fact and everything that went down between us, I still step in and help her take control of the situation. So, you got to do something about it, whether you like the person or not, or whatever. You have to. If they won't take control of the situation, somebody has to. And if you have that opportunity, I think you should do something about it.
David, thanks so much for your call. I appreciate it. I see all three of you nodding your head. So I'll start with you, Ruth, reacting to what David said.
Again, we've talked a lot about healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships, and one of the things that we need to take away from this is it's not okay to make excuses for other people, and we shouldn't necessarily blame ourselves. So oftentimes victims remain in relationships because, they love the other individual, but also because they're making excuses. He hit me because, she did this because, and either way, it's not okay. So even though we say that these things are complex, they're not as complex as we want to make them. That's why you see me shaking my head here. It's not that academic. It really is basic. It's about the fundamentals of what we need, what we deserve, and what we should have in relationships.
Natalie?
I applaud David for calling in and still trying to help, his ex-girlfriend. In the situation, she needs help. She may need more intense help because from what he's saying, she's been in so many abusive relationships. When she did get with him and he was treating her right, then she started abusing him. And then when they broke up, she went back to being in abusive relationships. So she's gotten so accustomed to that type of relationship that she doesn't know how to deal with it when it is right. And that's something that a lot of victims go through when they move on. And sometimes people look and say, well, how could you end up being in another abusive relationship? And sometimes men will even use that towards the woman. They may say, well, I wouldn't hit you. But then when you're in that next relationship and they may call you names and they try and be more controlling, they will say, well, I didn't do what he did. I never put my hands on you.
But they can be abused in other ways. Larissa, can you, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you don't get counseling, are you then more likely to just continue to be in abusive relationships?
I think everyone needs to really explore the dynamics, yes. And I also want to tell David I appreciate that he shared that he himself was a victim of abuse, because I think it's important that we acknowledge that anyone can be a victim and anyone can be a perpetrator, and there are lots of different influences on both. And that, yes, I think each party needs to step back, realize what's going on, and seek some counseling. Look at really what is happening here. Why is my behavior this way? If it is a result of a lifetime prevalence of violence or cycles of violence all around, it is time to break those cycles, to step in and figure out how can I approach my next relationship differently. And
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Richard joins us from Newport News. Hi, Richard. You're on the air. Hello, Richard?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
How you guys doing?
All right.
Okay, make this brief. Please allow me to say the devil's advocate. Please allow me to do this. I can certainly teach some people some stuff. Okay, the two previous callers, the lady said that she didn't see any signs. She saw some signs, but she didn't know what to look for. And the guy that just finished talking, it is a phenomenon that women do abuse men. Now, what I'm about to say in the devil's advocate is this. How long has this been going on? A lot of women pick and choose abusive men. Let me explain what I mean by that. This is what I'm talking about. They go with guys with tattoos, with earrings in their ear. They look for the bad boy edge. When you get guys in professional football and you know that they have to wind down from being abusive on the field, and they possibly can take that to the home, how many women keep going to guys like that? Ray Rice, that lady, and she married him. Now, come on now.
Okay, Richard, let me get, because we got a lot of calls, let me get some response from our panelists about your points. And the first point being, though, I think we need to be careful about saying that someone's look indicates that they are abusive. Would you agree with that, Ruth?
Right, because anyone can be an abuser, from the judge or the attorney to the person who is unemployed, at home, on the street. So it doesn't necessarily discriminate based on race, based on gender, based on how someone looks or presents themselves. I would have to disagree with that.
But in terms of and the NFL puts a spotlight on this, but this is something, he does make a good point. This has been going on forever.
I'd just like to address the notion that that someone is drawn to an abusive person. I don't think people are drawn to abusive people. I think that they're drawn to people who become abusive. But I don't think that people go into relationships knowing that the person they're going into a relationship with is going to treat them badly, make them feel bad, and physically or sexually hurt them. So, and I understand the point that he's trying to make about, that people might be drawn to a certain presentation of a certain but I think it's dangerous to sort of stereotype what we think an abuser looks like, or that we could spot one just by looking at even patterns of behavior. But certainly, I think some of us have tattoos.
Okay. All right. I want to get down to some real specifics in terms of if someone is out there and they're listening and they want to leave, what are some of the things that they need to think about and make sure that they have in place before they go? And let's start with you, Larissa.
Call an advocate. That would be my first advice, is that if you're thinking of leaving, find a safe place to call an advocate to help make a safety plan. A lot of people don't realize that leaving is the most dangerous time for someone who's in an abusive relationship. It is when lethality is the highest. It's when, and this is to that point of why doesn't someone just leave the relationship? One of the reasons is that it's really dangerous, and that someone stays at a heightened level of lethality, potential lethality, for up to 2 years after leaving. So there's really a lot of information.
2 years?
Yeah. And a lot of stalking happens toward the end of a relationship and then post-relationship. And then it's very difficult to make just a clean break and just move on. So there are a lot of things that will entangle someone back into that relationship. So making a plan, some of the things that we would suggest is really, some of the things are visualizing exit strategies from your home, putting together a bag with all of the things you need, making copies of all of your important documents, copies of keys, making sure you have financial resources available, having a place to go, calling a shelter or finding a family member where you're in a safe location, making sure that your children are aware of what's happening and that they are that they're on board with this, that they're understanding that you have a code word or something that means this is the time we're leaving and we're going now. So I think that each person's safety plan is very different and specific to each individual, and an advocate at any of our domestic violence hotlines can help someone make that plan specific to their situation.
Okay, and we'll give out that hotline number in just a minute. From a very personal perspective, Natalie, what would you tell someone who is trying to get out of an abusive relationship if they want to leave?
I would tell them that they can do it, and it's so much different on the other side once you've done it, to have that peace of mind. And a lot of times that control, they think they don't have the strength to do it, but you can do it. I would say, just like Larissa said, you have to make sure that you have your plan in place, but just like you're quiet about your abuse, that's how you have to be about your strategy to leave. You can't write things down. You can't tell people, because sometimes you can tell that one best friend and she may seem like she's there for you, but as soon as he confronts her, she may tell him everything you've said and say, well, look, I didn't want to get involved. He was threatening me, and I didn't want any problem, because he came to my house and I was fearful. So I ended up telling him exactly where you went. So it's so important.
Ruth?
You know, the one thing I would add to that, and Larissa and Natalie made very excellent points. One of the things that I believe stops individuals from leaving abusive situations is that they are so concerned about what other people will say. And so in addition to telling them to develop a safety plan and really think about how they can put resources and strategies in place to make the transition, I would say don't worry about what other people will say, because this could in fact be a matter of life and death. I heard some key statistics very recently about the number of homicides in Virginia that were related to intimate partner violence. The stat was over 120 individuals are killed or were killed in the state of Virginia in 2013 because of intimate partner violence, a significant number of them right here in Hampton Roads. So when thinking about whether or not they should stay in an abusive situation or leave once they've developed a safety plan, contacted an advocate or contacted a provider agency, I would remind them, you know, this isn't about the public humiliation. And Janay talked about that. She said, I feel like it's now become a reality. It was a reality the first time she was abused. What it will be a really horrific reality is if she or someone else, a victim, is killed as a result of the abuse that they are subjected to on a daily or regular basis.
Larissa, you talked about the kids and the code word for the kids. And we only have about 3 minutes left, believe it or not. The hours just flown by. But what should we think about in terms of the children? Also, especially if they've seen the violence and so forth.
Well, first of all, I think understanding that children are not, they're not safe from that violence, even if they're not in the presence of physical assault. The children early on, as 1 to 2 years old, are aware of what's happening, and the violence in their home is really affecting their development. So we have to make sure that, a lot of people will justify staying in a dangerous situation because they don't want to break the family up, and they think this is the best thing for the children. In reality, the best thing for the children is to get them out of a dangerous environment, even if it's an emotionally abusive environment, to put them in a world where we're reinforcing really happy, affirmative behaviors and relationships that build deep senses of self-security.
Okay. All right, ladies, I want to give you each about 30 seconds to just say something to someone out there that you want them to know so that they can help themselves or help a friend to get out of a violent situation. Ruth, I want to start with you. And then also give us the hotline number, please.
Sure. The hotline number for the YWCA, and it's a 24-hour hotline. It's open or available 7 days a week, is 226-YWCA. The one thing that I will say to any individual who is in an abusive relationship is that you deserve love, you deserve respect, you deserve to be treated kindly. And so, I would encourage them to make sure they are in a relationship where they are afforded all of those things, because anything else is not okay.
And that's Ruth Jones, the Executive Director of the YWCA Southampton Rose. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Natalie?
Yes.
What would you say?
I would say to someone who's in that situation, trying to get out, or even if they are out and they're having the struggle, to just continue to have the strength that they can do it. They can overcome all of these challenges if they just keep focused. And if they're religious, lean on their faith.
Okay.
And definitely lean on any kind of friends and family for support.
That they can do.
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Right. And I know there's a walk coming up that I guess between the two of you, very, very quickly, tell us what it's about.
It is the Samaritan Defeat Walk, and this year
It's Stop the Violence.
Stop the Violence. Okay. All right. When is it?
It's October 19th at Oceanfront, Virginia Beach. People can register on our website at SamaritanHouseVA.org.
Okay. And that's Natalie Purdie, who was a victim of domestic violence, doing well now and sharing her story so that others will be okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Larissa, you got the last 10, 15 seconds.
Okay, so I'll tell you this. One thing that is important for people to know is there are a lot of people on the other side there waiting to help you out. And the community is there too. So I want people to know about an event that's happening on Monday night. It's our annual Day of Unity, Night of Remembrance Candlelight Vigil. All of our domestic violence programs will be there at 6:30 at Peninsula Town Center in Hampton to memorialize those who have lost their lives to domestic violence in our community and to recommit to ending violence in our communities from here on.
Okay.
So.
And you're at SamaritanHouse.org, and
Yes.
that is Larissa Sutherland, who is an educator with Samaritan House. Ladies, thank you all so much. I can't believe we are out of time. Please, if you're out there and if you need help, please call 226-YWCA, and that will get you to the hotline. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Kamaria Mason answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fantastic weekend, everyone, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for another view.